read a book and that's about it.
Yesterday, if you were not here, and so I know Paige is taking care of him, Sean, you were not here. Remember tomorrow, and for everybody, Friday we got our Toolman model notes. So yesterday we finished those off. So we were going over the section as to how they would look. Remember, they'll be broken down into like groups of 3 statements, and all you have to identify is data, claim, warrant. So even though we were going over rebuttal, modality, the additional backing, all those things from the advanced Toolman model, that'll show up later on in the course, but that's not something that you need to be aware of solely for Friday's quiz. Also, dealing with Friday's quiz, today we're going to start going over logical fallacies, which are going to be very helpful for you to know about. We'll start going over them today, but anything that we discuss today is not going to be on this Friday's quiz. So Friday is solely Toolman model. You'll have those 3 statements, identify which is a data, claim, warrant. You'll have 4 sets of those 3 statements, so it's going to be a grand total of 12 points. Today, we'll start going over logical fallacies. Tomorrow, we take a 1-day break, come back to it Friday, because I won't be here again tomorrow. So when you come in tomorrow on the back table, there's going to be an article asking you whether cheerleading is a sport or an activity. And then there'll be some questions about the article. So it's 7 questions. You are going to turn in the questions to the sub, and I will go over them for points. It's going to be like a 10-point assignment, so you'll certainly get credit. So please turn them in. Don't forget about it. And it'll be an article that we're going to take a look at regardless of whether it was here or not. We're just going to switch the days around. But take a look at the article. You can answer the questions. I left notes for the subs that you are allowed to work in small groups if you want, so you can have up to 3 people, kind of discussing the ideas. So you can look around, decide if that's going to be advantageous for you or not. If you're sitting around, you want to work. You can decide. So that'll be up for you. And then on Friday, when we come back, first thing we'll do is the quiz for Toolman model, and then the plan will finish off with logical fallacies. Any questions about those things? And if you find Ryan's classes, you can get bonus points. Maybe he would be indebted to you, and you could get something worth your while. Okay, so if you did not already, there we go. Logical fallacies, you'd want to have a top of sheet. There are going to be, all told, 16 different logical fallacies that we're going to take a look at. Now, there are certainly more than 16. We could spend a whole week going over various logical fallacies and whatnot. But we're going to have 16, so I'll give you the term, definition, and then for each one I have an example. Sometimes it's in print, sometimes it might be comic strip, pictures, video. Certainly you want to keep track of the term and the definition. If the example is going to help you better understand it, write it down. But I'm not going to walk around and go, Andrew, you didn't write the whole example. How dare you? Some of them might be a little bit more lengthier than you would need. But if the example is helpful, by all means, I would go ahead and write that down. Without saying a fallacy or a flaw in logic, anybody have kind of a definition in mind as to what we probably mean when we say logical fallacies? Give it a shot. Okay, so not helpful to what you're trying to get across. I'd say that would work. Did you want to say a flaw in argument or fallacy? Just didn't know what to say. Okay. Anything else?
So when you say something that's not true, and the person knows it's not true, and then you out of it?
It definitely could, that would be probably the least positive scenario where if you, and it's not necessarily, I don't even want to say that it's not necessarily true, but there's still some hole within the logic itself. Now, they can be very effective. Or more often than not, this probably happens by accident and you don't mean for it to happen, but there can be cases where you want to use a logical fallacy or you decide to use a logical fallacy to your own advantage, and it can be very effective. But you run the risk where if Caitlin recognizes that you are using a logical fallacy and calls you out on it, then that's certainly where you run into some problems because the crowd, the audience, the judges probably are not going to view your arguments being nearly as strong. But we'll go over some examples here where certainly using logical fallacies can be beneficial to your argument. But generally, if we're looking at a definition, the textbook definition is going to be a flaw in the logical structure of an argument. So there is some kind of issue, some kind of problem with that logical component or that logos. The reasoning has, some kind of weak point in it. So there's going to be that error. Now, mention that a lot of times it does tend to be unintentional, although there certainly can be cases where it is intentional and you know that you are using it for the sake of your argument working a little bit better. But as Jocelyn points out, if you run into a person who recognizes the fallacy and calls you out, you could have a little bit of a problem. You're going to like this because within the debates in class, you're going to start, or the discussions, the arguments, you're going to start noticing when people are using the fallacies. It's also going to become very apparent to you in the cafeteria, with friends, at home, with parents, when you see those fallacies also getting used. And it will bring no more joy, nothing will bring more joy or satisfaction than telling mom or dad, logical fallacy. Can't use that. Which is fine. I have no problem with you saying that. Just don't go, Mr. Kane said you can't use that. Because now, Caitlin, you're bringing me into this situation that I don't need to be a part of. So you keep me separate from it. But by all means, if you notice it, go ahead, use it, make people uncomfortable in a logical form, and it will be okay. I would, for the most part, probably avoid doing it intentionally within here because I would hope that folks would certainly notice it. But certainly you might be in some situations where that fallacy could work. But certainly the unintentional kind can happen quite a bit. Reading over essays that English class was working on yesterday, and certainly not purposely, but I was noticing logical fallacies in their arguments. So certainly something you want to be aware of, so hopefully it doesn't get you in a little bit more trouble. So general definition, just that flaw in argument, but specific ones that we're going to take a look at. The first one, if we can get past this stage, is the general kind of all-purpose umbrella term, Latin non sequitur. If you were to translate it word for word, the idea means it does not follow. Non sequitur is similar to using a term like figurative language. Most of the types of logical fallacies that we're going to use would fit under this category of it does not follow, where the conclusion does not logically follow the premise or the argument. Figurative language can mean simile, metaphor, personification, hyperbole, oxymoron, onomatopoeia, all those things. Non sequitur is that basic logical fallacy where the conclusion that you're coming to does not follow the overall premise. So the example, Alec, would you agree that 2 is a number? Alex, would you agree that 1 is a number? Therefore, there's no reason that you could not possibly agree that 2 is the same as 1. Mrs. Everhart, Mrs. Robleski would absolutely agree, no problems. Shay, bring it up in math. I think your grade will skyrocket. Not that it's poor, but cement the status of it. 2 is not 1. We know they're both numbers, but this is not necessarily the same thing. If Sean, you working anywhere? Giant Eagle. Which one? It's a nice one. Go to Home Depot, eat some cereal. I stop right there. It's a good trip. Power drills and cereal, no best combination of items to buy. This is your senior year. Yes. How many seniors in here? I'm sorry, this is the most expensive year of your life.
Wow.
You got, homecoming's coming up soon. That's not too bad. But then you're going to start having, save money for prom, and then Andrew's going to get like a big limo and all that kind of stuff. And you got senior trip, class trip to Cedar Point. You start figuring out all those college application amounts that you have to put in. It ends up getting very pricey very quickly. CHS classes, if you're signing up, $235 is still a fair amount of money. You need more money? Who do you ask for money? No, not the right answer. He goes to the boss. I need a raise. I need more money. The boss's response is probably going to be no. In his mind, it would make sense. Well, you're the person who gives me the paycheck, so I should ask you for more money. I need more money to take care of these things. The boss is not just going to give them more money because the boss would want you to put in more hours, maybe you're doing more work, not that you're doing a poor job, but start to separate yourself from everyone else. The problem with non sequitur is in a lot of people's minds it makes sense. You're the person who gives me money, whether it be parent or whether it be boss, the employer, I'm going to ask you for money. But have you done anything to actually deserve the money would be where that logical fallacy starts to come in. So non sequitur, the idea of just asking for something, it does not follow. If anybody is superstitious, those would be examples of non sequitur. You know, especially when it comes to athletics, if you have routines that you need to do, or even like a routine in the morning that you have, and you go outside of your routine and you feel like the rest of the day is therefore going to fall apart, that would be non sequitur. You'll see baseball players when they come to the foul line will step over it because they feel it's bad luck to step on. If I step on it and then I go into a batting slump, that's non sequitur. You stepping on a line has nothing to do with whether or not you go into a slump or give up 3 home runs in the top of the ninth with 2 outs. It's a bad day last night. Bad night. Ryan might be lucky because he can't see this happening. We do. Straw man. Not just a scarecrow, but it would be a misrepresentation of someone's argument. So basically, you misrepresent an argument in order to make it easier to attack. This would be the second one, yep. So straw man means you take someone's argument, you misrepresent it so that you can make it easier to attack. Sarah, not to rehash bad memories, but how was that bike ride? Why are you so against exercise and healthy living?
Awful.
Someone asked me today what's my favorite vegetable. I said bacon. That's a pretty good.
It was wrong, but
That's still a pretty good vegetable. Sarah did not enjoy her bike ride, so, well, why are you against healthy living and exercise? She did not say she was, but I'm taking her argument and misrepresenting it. If we were to ask, you know, who's your favorite Briton in the family, and Alex goes, Chris, well, why don't you like Caitlin? He didn't say he dislikes you, but we take something that he or she said, and then you kind of spin it around to make it easier to attack. Yesterday, students for English class, they had to do an essay in class that I didn't tell them about. They were kind of upset. Did you get the TWA back yet?
yeah.
Good. Congratulations. So you got an H. That's higher. I had a teacher in college who would give out random letters, but the higher the letter, the worse the grade. So if you got like a Z, it was bad. R's and T's and all that kind of stuff, whatever. If after their essay they feel that they did a poor job and they slammed it down, why or do you want me to fail would be an example of straw man. They're taking the idea that because you have to do this assignment, I think you'll do poorly on it. I want you to do poorly on it so that you fail the class. So you're misrepresenting what someone's argument would be. This one, after Will said that we should put more money into health and education, Warren responded by saying that he was surprised that Will hates our country so much that he wants to leave it defenseless by cutting military spending. It's not that Will said, I want to take money from that area or that I want to leave the country defenseless, but if you are going to put more money in health and education and you're trying to avoid raising taxes, what do you have to do? Take the money from someplace else. Probably the largest budget would be the defense military, so that might be on the, not the chopping block, but you might be pulling money from there first. So you take someone's idea that they said and you twist it to make it a little bit easier to attack. Fairly common thing that we will do from time to time. This example, move it up so you can see a little bit better. The House Education Committee approved 9-5 the resolution that says the legislature does, quote, reject the core concepts of Darwinist ideology that certain races and classes of humans are inherently superior to others and does hereby condemn the extent to which these philosophies have been used to justify and approve racist practices. The resolution moves next to the full House for debate. This was coming from Louisiana a few years ago. taking a look at it, does anyone see the straw man? And it would be coming from the quoted part. So reject the core concepts of Darwinist ideology, ... Jocelyn?
Was it because they rejected the feminism, make it seem like they're racist, like they're trying to be racist, or that make it seem that it's okay to be racist?
You're headed down the right track, and certainly the way this is worded, it requires you to kind of understand what they would mean by Darwinist ideology. From a scientific standpoint, what's Darwin known for? Natural selection, survival of the fittest. Basically, you're looking at adaptations that animals make within an environment. So, if you are a bird without wings living in the highest pine tree, evolution's not going to go so well for you, because eventually little birdie Sean's going to get out of the nest and end of that species of birds. So it's a scientific concept. What does this imply about Darwinist ideology? That not only would it go to science, but Alec?
It would also apply to humans, and that some humans would be more advanced than others.
And the assumption would be, and I think, Jocelyn, this is where you were going with it, that if you were to agree with Darwinist ideology about natural selection, survival of the fittest, therefore you must also be racist. And they're two completely different things. Just because you would agree with Darwin's theory from science, environment, adaptations does not mean you're going to be racist. But the way this is being worded would mean that, okay, so if you go along with that Darwinist ideology, you would therefore believe that certain races, humans, are going to be superior to others, and that's not going to necessarily be the case. So that would be where a little bit of straw man gets put in to that example. All right, third one, reductio ad absurdum. We like our Latin phrases. Translate to is, so that's good. We have translate to, reduced to the absurd. So when an argument is reduced to an absolutely absurd conclusion in an attempt to prove that the argument is therefore untrue. And we'll go over some multiple examples here in a second, but I'll give you a chance to write that one down. And if you say reduced to the absurd, we know what you mean. You don't have to go reductio ad absurdum. If you feel more intellectual and want to say it, that's fine. We have a passage here, which certainly I'm not expecting you to write this one down. But humans believe the gods to be born and to have their own clothes, voice, and human form. So when humans depict gods, and we're talking about like Greek gods with this case, what do the Greek gods look like? Look like us, because we're the one who would be depicting them. But if oxen, horses, and lions could have hands, or could draw with his hands and complete the work as man's, then horses and oxen could draw pictures of gods like horses and oxen, and they would make the body in such a fashion as each possesses. So if Smokey and Smudgy, or no, Alex has Smokey? Is it Smudgy? What was the other one? Shadow. I knew it was that. Couldn't remember. So if we were to have Smokey, Smudgy, and Shadow draw their depiction of gods, according to this, what would they draw?
Cats.
Cats. Whiskers. Lions, tigers, not bears, oh my. So because if cats were to draw pictures of gods that would be cats, which we know to be untrue, therefore, human gods must be untrue, because it's only natural that Alex, a human, would draw a human as his being. So within this piece, it's an argument as to whether or not the gods exist, and the argument going, no, they do not exist, would be because if you let an ant draw a picture of its god, it would just look like a big ant. Do you have any cats? We had cat conversation. We're not talking to you.
Well, you're going this way.
I'm looking at him. Eye
I'm
contact.
behind him.
Okay. Dog. It's dog's name. Hank? Okay.
Wild.
Who came up with Hank?
I think my dad did.
Okay. The TWAs, high and low, so it's just H and L. Did he say, like, was it going to be 50-50 split? top half, bottom half, or just what he thought the score would be? Okay, so let's theoretically pretend, because it's fun, to say he were to eliminate the bottom half. So whatever however many are in your class, top 10, let's say 20, top 10 essays end up getting the high score, the passing score. Bottom 10 get the low score, no matter what. Would you folks like that if for every assignment we kept the top half good, pass, bottom half fail?
No. I hate it.
But you know where you stand.
That doesn't matter.
What would be a problem if we always eliminated the bottom half? 20 assignments come in, bottom 10, we go, nope, not keeping them. Oh, theoretically, you could keep going because then you have 20 assignments, dwindles down to 10, but now let's see which one are the good. Now you have 5. 5 gets a little tricky because it doesn't divide well, but we finally get it down to 2 assignments. We got Andrews, we got Page, we keep the top one, we get rid of the bottom one. Chances are we would keep Page and Andrews. Just want to see where people think we stand. He's the only one talking. I know we would keep Pages. You'd be okay. You would keep getting rid until there's only a little bit left. I'm not a big fan of Dilbert, but we got the same kind of idea within the comic strip. We're ranking engineers from best to worst. The plan is to get rid of the bottom 10%, and so unfortunately for Wally, that includes him. Now we get into this logically flawed though. If you fire the bottom 10%, you'll still have a bottom 10%. You'll fire and fire, but there will always be a bottom 10%, which is basically, Jocelyn, what you were getting towards, until finally, when less than 10 people are left, you'll have to fire body parts instead of whole people. Because if you fire a whole person, you're going over 10%. So then you'll have torsos, glands, wandering around, unable to use keyboards, blood and bile is going to be everywhere. So if we always get rid of a certain percentage, you're going to have to keep going back, but it gets to the point where it's not going to actually work from a mathematical standpoint. So we'll be removing fingers and toes, noses, kidneys, small intestines, all that stuff. Good way to spend 9 period. His argument doesn't make any sense. It's been reduced to the absolute absurd, but he's using it as a way to try to avoid having to worry about getting rid of that bottom 10%. Enjoy the Italian subtitles. I think that's what it is.
Do you mind if I stay here tonight?
No, yeah, take the couch. Or my bed. I just got new pillows, hypoallergenic.
The couch is good.
Hold that thought, Leonard, a moment.
Let me guess, you have a problem with this.
Where do I begin?
It's up to you. Crazy person's choice.
Well, first, we don't have house guests. Frankly, if I could afford the rent, I'd ask you to leave.
Your friendship means a lot to me as well. What else?
Well, our earthquake supplies. We have a 2-man, 2-day kit. So, if there is an earthquake and the 3 of us are trapped here, we could be out of food by tomorrow afternoon.
I'm sorry. Are you suggesting that if we let Penny stay, we might succumb to cannibalism?
No one ever thinks it'll happen until it does.
Penny, if you promise not to chew the flesh off our bones while we sleep, you can stay.
What?
He's engaging in reductio ad absurdum. It's the logical fallacy of extending someone's argument to ridiculous proportions and then criticizing the result, and I do not appreciate it.
I'll get you a blanket and a pillow.
Don't eat people. Yes, this one's real. Sean, you're making a funny face. It's a little bit different. Reductio ad Hitlerum, this one gets invented in roughly the 1950s. Anyone want to take a guess? And it certainly can change because it doesn't get used necessarily as much anymore, but we would probably substitute a different term and add a um to the end so it sounds Latin.
Was this like a new one made, or is it like a different name and they like changed it to this?
It certainly has. It's probably been around. It's been around for a while. But the Hitler term, came around in the 1950s because Hitler is recognized, was and still is, probably as almost like the epitome of evil. You know, who's the worst person you can think of? 1950, as any average, U.S. citizen, they're probably going to say Adolf Hitler. So what's happening in this picture?
Looks like
Oh, it's Obama.
It's
Obama.
President Obama, but what has happened? We're adding a little extra hair, put a little mustache, the idea to make him look like Hitler. So the assumption, therefore, is that propaganda picture, the comparison, the idea is the person coming up with it would want you to view Obama on the same level as Hitler. So Jocelyn, people have been doing that for years, where you would think of somebody and you try to compare someone else to represent them in a very unflattering way. But in 1950s, because Hitler kind of became that preeminent face, that's when that's when the term ended up being coined. Today, probably someone more like Osama bin Laden, years before Saddam Hussein, whoever's kind of like public enemy number one at a given point, it would certainly work. How about this one? Who is it? It's George Bush. So, now we have a Republican and a Democrat comparison that is being made. Is Bill Clinton. Could be first man of the United States, I guess. Is it first husband, first man? Since we won't have first lady if Hillary's elected. That could be a spar debate. First husband or first man. Speaking of Hillary. Now here is the best part, I think, to this one. No, I don't have a Trump. It's hard to read because of the red, but by Hillary Clinton. I like the pun. So the idea, and these are all obviously visual, not words, but it certainly still can be done verbally, where you take a decision that someone has made and you compare it to, Nazi Germany. You're still doing a reductio ad Hitlerum. But again, it doesn't have to be Hitler necessarily. It would be really whoever is kind of viewed as being the most evil person. If you would only do this in the negative sense, you're not going to do a reductio ad whatever and then pick a positive personality. People still might try to compare themselves positively, but the logical flaw is more where you're attacking the credibility of the person by comparing him or her to someone who's known as being evil, greedy, whatever the concept is that you're trying to do. Anecdotal. We do this one a fair amount. You take personal experience or an isolated example instead of having a valid argument to dismiss an argument. And statistics tends to be a popular thing that tries to get dismissed with this. You remember, I think it was the second day when we were doing the intro to rhetoric notes, we had the YouTube excerpt from Mad Men, the advertising firm, where you had Lucky Strikes cigarettes, and they're trying to come up with a way to still market cigarettes because now the Surgeon General warning is coming out on the pack of cigarettes that they could be bad for your health. And what's the term that we end up deciding to focus upon? It's toasted, just like Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Still had some this morning, very good. Anyone recall what the son of the owner said as to how their grandfather died? We're going back like 2 weeks. My granddaddy smoked and lived to be 95, got hit by a truck. Was how he died. Similar concept to what's going on over here. Jason said that was all cool and everything, but his grandfather smoked like 30 cigarettes a day and lived until 97. So don't believe everything you read about meta-analyses and sound studies showing proven causal relationships between smoking and lung cancer, or ultimately death. So an anecdotal kind of logical fallacy would be you're taking some kind of personal experience where it's not going to be the rule, but it's going to be the exception. But you try to pass it off as a reason to dismiss some kind of sound, logical, reasoned argument. It doesn't have to be personal in the sense that you're the one who did something, but you certainly are aware of it or know. So it would be about, my grandfather or my granddaddy smoked them for how long, died by getting hit by a truck, car, had nothing to do with smoking the cigarettes. Or in this case, living to be 97. So you take an isolated example and use that as a reason to dismiss something that would otherwise be fairly scientifically sound, but again, statistics ends up being something quite a bit that would happen. Slippery slope. It's like the domino effect. The apocalypse is coming, or Armageddon. Slippery slope means that you assume that if a certain action is taken, then a series of undesirable and unavoidable consequences will soon follow. And they're certainly all going to be negative.
Does this also kind of follow the butterfly theory that if you like go back in time and kill a butterfly, that'll like cause a series of events that will end the world?
Yes, it could. Is that true? What was it? Oh yeah, like the old DirecTV commercials. Yeah, those were beautiful for slippery slope. Because yeah, that's the one where the guy would get mugged and all those kinds of things just because he decided to go with cable. Yeah, those would be excellent examples. Much more entertaining than the example that I have up here. That if you fail the logical fallacy quiz this week, which we know is next week because Pullman Law is this week, then you'll probably fail this class, which will lead you to flunking out of school. You'll be unemployed and basically become a burden to society. For slippery slope, and the butterfly thing is, I guess, a little skewed because we're going back in time, which might be easy for some of us or more difficult for others, I suppose. Is you're basically telling the future with it, which you cannot do. You know, if you take this course of action tonight, then tomorrow, the next week, the next month, all of these things will happen. In today's world, and I hate going back to it over and over because it's the easiest example to do, but you know, presidential election, if you vote for Hillary, well, here's what's going to happen. And then you have the other side, well, if you vote for Donald Trump, here's what's going to happen. And no one can really say for certainty that that is the case. Slippery slope, it's going to be an undesirable domino effect. Sarah, a lot of times people ask the question, does it still work if you do it in opposite, where if you vote for someone, then everyone will have good paying jobs, everyone will be happy, there will be world peace, no more conflict. Technically that's not going to be slippery slope because now you're promising good things as opposed to, you know, negative Armageddon coming, all that kind of stuff. But it is that domino effect, slippery slope, you're going to fall down, you're headed down the wrong path, you know, if you do some course of action. So if you get an L on your TWA, Mr. Heil will spite you for the rest of your life, you'll become popular, no one will like you, you'll have cable, and end up in a ditch somewhere. What's the family? I haven't seen them in a while. What's the family with the cable commercials? There's like the Prairie, the Pioneer Life.
Oh.
The Settlers.
The Settlers, yeah, that's right. They settled for cable. And now they have like gray squirrel stew and all that kind of stuff. So they settled. Those ones were much better than the Settler commercials, I think. The slippery slope ones that they had. Appeal to authority. Basically what it sounds like, you're using the opinion or position of an authority figure or maybe a higher institution of authority instead of an actual argument. So not being able to defend his position that evolution isn't true, Bob says that he knows a scientist who also questions evolution as well. So since I don't have an argument, I'm going to point out the fact that someone who's smart, well-respected also goes along with it. It's kind of like using ethos, you know, ethos, pathos, logos, ethos being the credibility, but you're doing so in a manner that's not really going to advance your argument. If you got into argument, when it comes to automobiles, sometimes people are very traditional. Like for the long time, either you like Ford or you like Chevrolet. Why do you like Ford trucks? I don't know, because my dad liked Ford. And my granddaddy always drew Ford, so Fords must be the best, or vice versa for Chevrolet. You don't have a real argument, but you're going, this is what my dad did, this is what my grandfather did, so it must be right. This can get a little bit dicey, because depending on who the authority figure is, if it is someone close to you, like a parent, you know, sibling, and people call you out, then you feel as if they're attacking the credibility of a loved one, which can make the situation a little bit trickier to deal with. But if you came up with an argument that's unpopular and you simply went, well, you know, scientist so-and-so is also in favor of it, that's not really giving a reason why you think it's a good idea, but you're just going, well, someone else is in favor of it as well. the Stephen Colbert interview, is it fair to say you're a do-nothinger? Well, there's another one, and he's a Democrat. If a Democrat's doing it, it must be okay for me to do it as well. It would kind of be like that appeal to authority as well. Last one we'll do for today, bandwagon. When we hear the term bandwagon, what word do we a lot of times put after it? Jumping on the bandwagon or bandwagon fan, where people start to like something because it's popular at the time. December of last year, you could argue a lot of people really didn't care what the Penguins did, and then by the time May and June rolled around, everyone was wearing Penguin jerseys as they're going through Stanley Cup Finals. So an argument or claim based on the actions of others instead of having reason to it. Another term that you will hear from time to time is a thing called ad populum, where this is arguing that something is good because it is popular. Bandwagon, generally there is pressure to align. So ad populum, you're going along, people think it's good, so I'll think it's good too. Bandwagon, technically there would be a little bit more pressure. Got a video that I want you to check out then. Anyone familiar with what Prop 8 was in California? It's called Proposition 8, and it was put up for vote where Prop 8 would outlaw same-sex marriage in California. And it passed, where the people of California voted to not have same-sex marriage. Now, that since has been overturned and whatnot. But here is a video. Now, bandwagon, just because you're guilty of a logical fallacy doesn't mean the argument itself is wrong, but check to see if you can figure out what the fallacy part so far as the bandwagon approach would be. If we can get the cursor. There we go.
Hi. I'm a mom living right here in California.
And so am I.
And so am I.
So am I.
On November 4th, I'm voting no
on Prop 8. Because I want my kids to know
about the American dream,
about dignity,
compassion,
and kindness.
We refuse to be scared by all the lies.
About what will be taught in schools. So on behalf of so many moms across California,
Say no.
say no.
Vote no.
No. Prop 8. Equality for all.
Vote no on Proposition 8. Thank you.
Who is telling you to vote no? The moms. So the bandwagon approach would be if the moms are in favor of it, then you should vote for it as well. So not saying the idea is poor by any means, but simply the manner which you're trying to persuade would be bandwagon.
I'm good. Mr. Kane, I have a question.
Okay?